Joining us, Punchbowl News co-founder and MS Now political contributor Jake Sherman, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree, Senior Advisor for the Lincoln Project and Mitt Romney's Chief Strategist for his 2012 presidential campaign, Stu Stevens, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Ann Applebaum. All right, Jake, this is squarely in your wheelhouse right now. What happens with Senator Graham gone?
Well, there's a tremendous number of implications, both long and short term. Let's start with the short term. The governor of South Carolina, rather, is going to fill that seat today, expected to be Graham's sister, Darlene, which is what the president is pushing for. She will serve until at least November. I don't think she has any designs on running for office in November when Senator Graham, the late Senator Graham, was going to be up for re-election. Everybody I've spoken to who is thinking about a run in this for this seat, many people in the House and some people in the state are basically waiting to see what Trump wants, who he wants to run. State like South Carolina, Trump's endorsement does carry tremendous weight, although it didn't really work out that way in the gubernatorial contest. But anyhow, everybody wants to see what Trump wants. Russell Fry is looking at it. William Timmons is looking at it. Nancy Mace, who ran for governor, is looking at it. Ralph Norman's looking at it. All these folks are trying to see whether there's a race for them for this Senate seat. So that's in the immediate short term. In the medium term, they have to figure out who's going to take some of Graham's committee assignments, very key committee assignments. He was chair of the Senate Budget Committee. That's likely to go to Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He has a seat on the Appropriations Committee. That's also going to be up for grabs, at least in some respect. And in the long term, Katie, and this sounds trite, whatever one thought of Lindsey Graham, and there are a lot of opinions on both sides of this issue, he was in the mix on literally every subject on Capitol Hill: foreign policy, tax, healthcare, budget matters. He flowed kind of easily through all of those things. He was a humongous presence on the international stage, at least when you compare him to other members of Congress. There won't be somebody like that in the immediate again. I mean, he has been in the House he's been in Congress since 1994. He had relationships with members of both parties, very good relationships with Democrats, although they got into a lot of political squabbling. Does it make it harder for Trump to get some of the things he wants done? Yes. Trump, in fact, said today, well, why don't you pass this crypto bill in honor of Lindsey Graham? Lindsey Graham had really nothing to do with crypto. So the White House is trying to get some political wins out of this, looks like, out of this death. But in the long term, I don't know that there'll ever be somebody as skilled, and again, both sides of this are arguable. He shifted easily between positions, let's say that, but he was a very skilled politician, a very skilled legislator who was, I can't think of a deal over the last 15 years, 17 years that I've been covering Congress, Katie, that he wasn't at least somewhat a part of at some stage, and you can't say that about too many members of Congress.
Well, it's interesting. The White House is trying to get the one thing that he was not a part of passed by using his name. Let me talk about Todd Blanche and get you on one more, Jake, before I move on to everybody else. And that is, does Todd Blanche get confirmed? With Lindsey Graham gone, with Mitch McConnell not yet back, does he get confirmed?
Well, Graham's sister is going to be in the seat, I would imagine, in the next couple of days once that announcement comes. They will probably, I would assume, need McConnell. It's not clear to me when McConnell will be physically ready to come up here. I still do believe that Blanche will be confirmed. I do. I don't know when, and there's not really a hard clock to get him confirmed. McConnell, his staff said he's probably not going to be up here this week voting. Perhaps he'll be up here next week or the week after that before the August recess. But there's definitely an urgency to get Blanche confirmed. And also, we're going to have Jay Clayton, whose hearing is this week, for Director of National Intelligence. That will also be something where you're going to probably need at least close to full attendance on the Republican side to get that done. So the sooner the better for McConnell to get back here, although he's clearly dealing with some serious health struggles himself.
Yeah, Jay Clayton, though, has some Democratic support, it seems. There's no Democratic support for Todd Blanche. Tom Dupree, give me your assessment on Todd Blanche's nomination and whether it should go forward.
Well, I think the loss of Senator Graham will likely delay Todd Blanche's confirmation, but I don't think it will prevent it. Look, I mean, you can fill Lindsey Graham's seat, but there's no replacing Lindsey Graham. I think the hearing, the confirmation may well be delayed because this was going to be a razor-thin confirmation regardless of the circumstances. There are some Republicans who have questions, I think fairly legitimate questions about whether Blanche can serve as Attorney General in terms of preserving his independence from the president and act as his own guy and apply the rule of law and call the shots as he sees it. Those questions are still going to come. I think the loss of Senator Graham, he was kind of a senior voice in the room. A lot of people would be very interested to get his thoughts on it. So I think his loss will delay things. But at the end of the day, my best guess is that Blanche will get confirmed by the United States Senate to serve as Attorney General.
So, Anne, what does that signal to the rest of us about what this DOJ is going to be like and what Republicans are willing to tolerate?
In that sense, it's interesting that you're asking me that question in the context of a conversation about Lindsey Graham. He really was the epitome, the kind of personalization of the transformation of the Republican Party from a party that spoke eloquently and frequently about democracy and about the American tradition and the need to protect and defend democracies around the world, to a party that became very transactional and very much run by Donald Trump. And the idea that there would be a Department of Justice with very little independence, that the Attorney General would be somebody who has personal ties to the president and everybody understands that he's being made Attorney General in order to defend the president and including his personal interests, isn't something that people would have accepted some years back, and especially Republicans. The idea that the White House is taken over by a single person, and that the interests of the United States, both domestic and foreign, are the same, treated the same as the president's personal interests, that would have been unacceptable. But we're in a new era now, and Graham was somebody who was really the leader of that transition of the party.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Stu, expand on that.
Well, look, I think that Lindsey Graham's a tragedy, and the tragedy is exactly as Ann says, what happened to the party. How do you be the same guy who was basically a John McCain? He was his idol. In the 2008 campaign, I spent a lot of time when I was working for Romney hanging out with Lindsey Graham because, in essence, he was a staffer like we were. Everybody liked him. And then he becomes a Trump person. I just don't understand this, how you can be that same person except for naked ambition. Or maybe it was an act when you said that you supported John McCain. But look, the idea, I mean, like Ann says, a criminal defense lawyer, the president of the United States. First, the president of the United States has a criminal defense lawyer. But that criminal defense lawyer is going to be the person who's Attorney General, someone who has done absolutely nothing on the Epstein files. He's filed seashell conspiracy, but not anything about Epstein. In fact, he meets with the most notorious pedophile of our time, Ghislaine Maxwell, and out of that comes a Club Fed that so offends the inmates at the Club Fed. That's pretty rare, that inmates are offended by another person coming in. I think Todd Blanche will be an absolute disaster, probably will get confirmed, and it's just another sort of sign that the Republican Party really doesn't care about what it says for years that it cared about and doesn't really care about America.
I want to get to the stuff that, Ann, you alluded to regarding foreign policy, and Jake, you were talking about this as well. But I am curious, Jake, in just looking at the makeup of the Senate right now, with Graham gone, I know his sister might get in a few days, McConnell out. I wonder if this changes any of the calculations that Senator Susan Collins might be making right now and the pressure it might be putting on her from the Trump wing, Donald Trump himself, but also on her politically as she approaches the midterms in November.
Well, I mean, I think she's singularly focused on winning, and I think the big issue here, Katie, is that this United States Senate is going to change quite appreciably in the next Congress. McConnell's going to be gone, Cornyn's going to be gone, Lindsey Graham is going to be gone. You're just going to have a lot of people who are kind of stalwarts of the, whether you think it's the Republican Party of old, it's really not anymore, but people who who have been here for a long time are going to be gone. Susan Collins is kind of the last vestige of that era and of that kind of, I mean, I don't know if they don't really represent the same kind of politics, but anyway, of that era. From a voting perspective, I think that Collins is, I don't know that it's going to change her calculus in any way, shape, or form. I don't know. I think that she's going to do what she thinks she needs to do to get reelected, which is what most people do up here anyway. And that's not a criticism. That's just an acknowledgement of the reality that you are, that's your chief objectives, 5 months before an election, less than that, 3 months before an election.